Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next edition of Roadmap to Success. We are delighted and privileged to have with us for today's episode Mr. Ram Gopal, who is the CEO of Barclays India. In today's episode, we are going to talk about the emerging trends in the financial sector and what are the opportunities that are going to be available for the youth who may be interested in building their careers in the financial services sector. What are your perspectives on the growth trajectories that you see in the financial services industry, and what are the factors that will continue to fuel the growth of the financial services sector?
I think the first and the foremost is, I think we spoke a lot about how technology has been shaping industries, right? And it's not just the BFSI industry, which I represent, but I think this is true for any industry, one way to look at. What has happened because of those technology-powered growth is not just the manner in which the services are distributed, but new business models have come into work. And there are many examples that I can give about how those business models have evolved. Recently we were talking about how, you mentioned the phenomenal amount of growth of AUMs on the personal financial, investment segment. Those were not there when I started the industry. People were still looking at physical assets for growth as investment vehicles. Now there is a secular trend where investments are moving away from physical assets to financial assets. Yeah, so that has happened. But fundamentally, the banking as a definition hasn't changed much. We are intermediate between providers of capital and for people who require that capital. So that fundamental disintermediation role we still perform. But the manner in which those services are performed has just enormously changed.
There is often this sort of a challenge being experienced that the industry is not able to attract adequate number of young people into the industry with the right skills. So we often hear about the skill gap that exists. And in this context, Barclays has successfully put in place an initiative called Connect with Work program. Can you tell us a little bit about how this initiative works and how this has benefited students across the country?
I think, Uma, that I think is a very pertinent thing. And I think one of the things when you said, what is the direction of travel for an industry? I think in my mind, one of the realization is that the business exists beyond creating value only for shareholders. The concept of stakeholders, the concept of doing good, the concept of ability to develop the communities around you. I think that is something that has firmly taken shape ever since I joined this industry. So this Connect with Work that you reference is Barclays' response. I think we call it citizenship. And this is about trying to work on both sides of the employment puzzle. On one side, as you rightly say, we've got, and I think estimates vary, but my sense is that there's roughly about 1 million people who enter the workforce every month. Yeah? And it's only about a quarter of them who are successfully placed. So the statement that there exists a gap is true. And if you think there are roughly about 750,000 young men and women who are unable to find jobs despite holding a degree, is perhaps why we think this demographic dividend could potentially become a bit of an issue if we are not able to address that. Yeah, so this Connect with Work program is Barclays' response to try and see whether they can, working with like-minded partners, try and see whether we can resolve in our own little humble way. So on one side, can we try and provide for these young men and women job-ready skills such that they find it easier to place themselves in jobs without that intervention. That's one side of the employment puzzle. And the other side is, can we work with entrepreneurs, not early stage entrepreneurs, but in our assessment, I think where there is tremendous amount of value that can be provided is if you work with entrepreneurs who already have scaled, but try and provide for them the next leap. Work with them to try and increase the ability for their businesses to create more jobs. So this is essentially what we are trying to do.
So when you look at this sort of an initiative enabling them to go and work in any sector, I would also like you to tell us what are your views, what are your thoughts on how the future of work will be. Particularly in the context of the financial services sector, we have seen several fintech companies coming along. Banks are rethinking their own models, as a result of which we are seeing some of the roles disappearing, some new roles are getting created, and there is often some concern about whether robots are going to take away some of their jobs. So how do you see the future of work, and how do you think the youth of today need to be preparing themselves to be able to work alongside technology in the coming days?
I remain very optimistic in the sense that in our assessment, in my own assessment, I think this would be a net positive, as in despite all that we hear about artificial intelligence and the rise of the robots, to put it simply, my sense is that I can quote several research, and one of the research report that I read recently was something done by Harvard pathologists, and this kind of explains where I'm going with this question. If we were to let machines themselves diagnose, I think that experiment was about diagnosing early stage of cancer. I think the accuracy rate of those machines was roughly about 92%. And if humans were to review the same data, the accuracy was about 96%. And one of the things that the pathologists did was they tried to join up the machines and the humans together, and suddenly the accuracy rate went up to 99.5%. So they called it assisted intelligence, and that is where I personally sit in this debate. I think there is much gain to be obtained by putting the power of the machines alongside some of the judgmental, creative, relationship building skills that humans have got. So I guess we've got to do a lot in my mind about trying to make it easier for colleagues who work with us to be able to learn on the job and to learn continuously. I think if that were to happen, and if we can bring the magic of the machine and the humans together, in my mind, I don't think we need to fear the rise of the robots. I think that's how I see the future play out. Yeah. So for me, the future of work is one strongly predicated on assisted intelligence.
So, in order to be ready for that sort of a future workplace, what would be the top 3 or 4 skills that the young people today who are entering into the workforce should continuously be working upon?
We've heard a lot about growth mindset and a fixed mindset, right? If one can cultivate the growth mindset, the ability with a given set of tools that we can navigate our learning curve, that fundamentally is what I'm referring to. I think that's the first skill that I would call out for, the ability to, while we may not automatically be able to interpret, while that skill is welcome, but while we may not be automatically a digital native, the ability to be resilient and work ourselves to be a migrant in that digital path is a skill that I would call out for first and foremost. Then we spoke about it in passing reference, the ability to stay hungry, ability to learn continuously through these journeys with that growth mindset, I think is possibly another facet which I'll call for. And the third one, I go back to where I started. Specifically, our industry is one where it is predominantly about people. So those relationship skills are going to be ever important. If you look at how this modern corporation is set up, it's no longer hierarchical. We call it agile working, right? You have a particular campaign, you get cross-functional people come together for that campaign, and as soon as the campaign is successful, this gets disbanded. So traditional hierarchies don't work anymore. Therefore, the ability to work laterally, collaborate, seek out partnerships that are useful, ability to persuade, ability to communicate succinctly. I think those are skills, these relationship skills which encompasses all of this are going to be very important. So in summary, if I were to look at it, I think I would develop a growth mindset, resilient, that we can navigate through these change, that's at an unprecedented pace. The second one I would call for is one around continuous learning. The third one I would call for is one around continuing to improve one's relationship skills. I think these are possibly what I would place.
Thank you very much, Ram, for that very, very insightful conversation we had. So the key takeaway from our conversation is that we must be prepared for more and more changes in the days to come, in the years to come. And very important capability, therefore, would be to build resilience, to remain resilient, to cope with these changes, to build a successful career.
Yeah.
Thank you very much,
Thanks.
Ram, for your time.
Thank you so much, Umar.
Thanks
Thank
a
you so
lot.
much.
Thank you.